And I'd like at this point to introduce our moderator for the U.S. Senate panel, star of stage, screen, and, well, at least television, and the American Spectator, Jeff Lord. Jeff.
All right. Let me start. Welcome to PLC again for another year of memories, which is only beginning. Let me start by introducing you to our two panelists. The first is Rose Tennent. Rose has been a prominent figure for 20 years, right over here, Rose, as a syndicated political talk show host. She is a frequent guest host for Sean Hannity's radio show and is a contributor to American Thinker. She serves on the executive board for Moms for America and can currently be heard on Pittsburgh Radio. In 2020, she served on the board of directors of Laura Trump's Women for Trump. Rose, welcome. Next, we have John Gizzi. John is, as I'm sure you know, Newsmax's chief political columnist and White House correspondent. He is the man who knows everyone in Washington, not to mention many who hold elected positions and party leadership roles throughout America. For many years, John held a similar position with the venerable conservative publication Human Events. He's appeared on countless radio and TV shows in both America and Europe. He is the recipient of the William A. Rusher Award for Journalistic Excellence and was named Journalist of the Year by the Conservative Political Action Conference. John. Thank you. And I can tell you, this is the first time John has been to my left on anything.
Too bad no one else could hear that.
Now, I'd like to bring out our candidate. You can have a seat there, John. All right. I'd like to bring out our candidates, and they're being introduced in the order in which they appear on the ballot. So number one is Kathy Barnett. Here she is. Kathy is a veteran, a former adjunct professor of corporate finance, a much sought-after conference speaker, and conservative political commentator. Next up is Dr. Mehmet Oz. Dr. Oz is the host of the Emmy Award-winning The Dr. Oz Show and is an attending physician at New York Presbyterian Columbia Medical Center. He has performed thousands of heart operations and has practiced medicine simultaneously with his TV show. He lives in Bryn Athyn with his wife Lisa of 36 years. They have raised 4 children and are the grandparents to 4. George Bochetto. There he is. Let me get George's bio here so you'll know. George is an attorney who resides in Philadelphia. He is a lifelong member of the athletic community in Pennsylvania. In 1995, he was appointed Pennsylvania State Boxing Commissioner and served in that role until 2002, completely overhauling the regulation of boxing in Pennsylvania while at the organization's helm. Next up, Jeff Bartos. Jeff owns a contracting company and several real estate acquisition and development companies active in the greater Philadelphia market. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Jeff founded the Pennsylvania 30-Day Fund, a nonprofit providing forgivable loans to small businesses affected by COVID-19 and the related business shutdowns that have devastated Main Street small businesses. And in 2018, he was the Republican nominee for Lieutenant Governor. Sean Gale. Sean is a business and healthcare attorney with a BBA from Temple University's Fox School of Business. He also has a JD from Villanova Law School and an LLM in healthcare and pharmaceuticals from Drexel University's Klein School of Law. And next we have Carla Sands. Ambassador Carla Sands grew up in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. She was married to the late Fred Sands, and after his passing, she went on to lead his company and became the first woman to serve as chairman and CEO of Vintage Capital Group. She was appointed by President Trump to serve first on the President's Economic Advisory Council. Later, the President appointed her the United States Ambassador to Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. So, these are our candidates and the ground rules. I want all of you to know what all of these folks know. We will have an hour and 15 minutes. The first hour will be spent with the candidates answering questions from our panelists, Rose and John. Sometimes everybody will be asked to answer the same question. Sometimes a particular candidate may get a question. I'll leave that in the hands of our panelists. The last 15 minutes will be devoted to giving each candidate 3 minutes for a closing statement, and 3 minutes will be the length of allotted time with the clock running up there during the hour for a candidate to answer their question. They can feel free to use all 3 minutes or not as they choose. And also, I have been asked by the PLC to make clear that this is a policy forum where candidates can make known their positions on the issues. We want to steer away from personal attacks in the interest of our PLC audience, all of whom, as I well know, are conservative activists who very much want to hear all of your positions on the issues of the day. So with that, I will sit down and turn it over to Rose and John, beginning ladies first with Rose.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, Trump can't tweet, but the Kremlin can. And the Babylon Bee can't tweet, but the Chinese Party can. Members of Congress have been shadow banned, they've been put in timeout, and some of them have been told they are never allowed back on the platform again. This is a very important issue, and I'll give you an example. Just this past week, the Pennsylvania Family Institute had a gubernatorial forum like this. They put it up on YouTube, and it was promptly taken down because of misinformation. I can believe that. It was put up, but after a fight. So here's my question, and I will start with Kathy. Big tech definitely needs to be held accountable. What would you propose to do if you were elected to break up that monopoly?
Yes, if we didn't know how powerful this small elite group of people were prior to the pandemic, surely we know how powerful they are today, right?
Right.
And one of the things we must get real straight in this country, COVID does not trump the US Constitution, nor does Google, nor does Facebook, nor does Twitter, right? The First Amendment, I heard earlier someone say, can people enumerate the first 5 rights within the Constitution, in the First Amendment? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, and freedom to petition your government with grievances, right? And that's just the First Amendment, right? And we have seen that these people, this little oligarch, this little elitist group of people have believed that they can trump our rights. And we have Congress who's not really pushing back a whole lot on it. Just this past Thursday, Biden came out to inform us that the greatest epidemic of today is violence against transgenders, right? No, I don't think so. Because more than 80% of our freedom of speech, we use the tool of social media to do so, to express ourselves. So we have Section 230, but we've always had Section 230. We had Section 230 when the House was controlled by Republicans, when the Senate was controlled by Republican, and when we had a Republican president. So you are the engine behind these elected officials. You have to make it a bigger issue because we've already have Section 230. And you have to make sure that they enforce the laws and that it is important to them as much as it is important to you to make sure your voice is not being shallow banned. And Lord knows I feel it. It is just crazy out here trying to deliver an effective message. But also antitrust. These companies need to be broken up. It is time for that, right? But this is an issue. All of this, though, is an issue of trust. If your child is not in STEM, then what are we talking about? Everyone is talking about STEM, right? It's because we understand that technology is here. It is here for the duration, and we need to get about the business of protecting our country. And it comes down to trust. How many of you trust Mark Zuckerberg to do the right thing? You shouldn't. But again, this is not going away. We need to become very loud about it in the legislature. We need to begin to put up the guardrails for it, because now we're talking about digital currency, which is a hard pass for me, but we're also talking about cryptocurrency. It is not going away. And the foundation of all of it is trust. We need to begin to shore up that trust with legislation that works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Oz?
I have a little personal experience with big tech. I went to war with them several times while hosting my show on the biggest playing field out there, which is network television. I witnessed firsthand how they pervert truth. They would run fake ads. They'd lie about who was funding them. They ran fake advertisements around, for example, energy policy. We now know Putin was influencing many of those ads by investing in getting green activist groups who would never get censored, be able to say whatever they wanted to against energy policy, actually in the disinterest of the country's best interest. But my most recent personal experience happened when I launched my campaign. There was a Philadelphia Inquirer article saying Dr. Oz enters race, and within a week they'd gotten so much hate mail about me that they took me off. And they said, they're not gonna call you doctor anymore, even though you earned the doctor and you're still practicing medicine. So I have, a lot of social media followers, 13 million. I've dealt with these folks in a fairly large way. The Philadelphia Inquirer has 250,000. So I went to war with them, criticizing them for being against the meritocracy. And they took me down. They wouldn't allow me to spread the word on social media. So I elevated it. They won't tell you why, by the way. That's the other part of the heinous way that they censor conversation. You don't know why you get censored. You don't know for how long, and you don't know what to do to get back on again. So I took it to the airwaves. I went on Sean Hannity that night. I complained bitterly about the fact there's a double standard with conservatives. And you all know this, right? If you're a liberal saying things on the far left, they never take you down. You pointed out Putin and others. You're far right? And you're saying things that are basic American values, they'll take you down because you don't kowtow with them. And it's all under the guise of being fair. It's not fair whatsoever. We won. They backed down. And here's the message. They're cowards. If we act forcefully, they will not take us on. But if we don't say what we see, which is what we have been conditioned to do, especially during COVID, they will prosper and they will be able to continue censoring us. I was at CPAC this year. I did an event with Dr. Malone. You all know who he is, Dr. Malone? Right? I think a very wise man. He was one of the inventors of the mRNA vaccine. He went on Joe Rogan's show and Joe got canceled because of it. I did a panel with him at CPAC. I found him to be incredibly insightful. Here's a man you will not find on social media anymore. Not on Twitter, you can't find him on YouTube, he just doesn't exist. Yet he's a wise man with lots of insights. The only way for us to fight back is to take out Section 230. Section 230, written in 1996 in order to ostensibly protect new companies that were like fax machines, not responsible for the paper coming out of their machines, has been used and weaponized. They are trading, they were, until I took them on with others, children, sex trafficking children, because they could hide behind Section 230. And I'll tell you why they're able to keep Section 230 on despite child sex trafficking until very recently, and many other things even today, because they have more lobbyists in Washington than we have congressmen on Capitol Hill. And if you have that kind of a powerful lobby moving against you, it's hard. That's why you need brave, bold voices like mine to defend Pennsylvania and Washington.
Thank you. George?
Thank you. Is this working?
Yes.
There's a lot of misunderstanding out there about Section 230. I think you just heard a little bit about it. Section 230 was inaugurated because the data companies originally went to Washington and said, look, we're just platforms. We're not advocating for the right, for the left, for this cause, for that cause. We're just transmitting. Well, of course, they got an immunity under Section 230 so that whatever gets transmitted, they can't get sued for. That then gave them license to put anything out there they wanted. And what they've perverted Section 230 into is an immunity from litigation, an immunity from liability, while at the same time now making choices. Who gets to go on their platform and who doesn't? Is there any more drastic a method of censorship in this country or any country than deciding who gets to speak and who doesn't? When you have a president of the United States who is not allowed to address the populace of the country, while at the same time the Ayatollah gets to also get onto a thing, you have a problem. And the problem is 230 and it's been perverted. And with all due respect to Dr. Oz, I don't think he quite understands what the significance of 230 is. Now let me also say this. Data in this country has become more valuable than gold. It's more valuable than cryptocurrency. It's what our algorithms depend upon. Everything that happens in data, everything that happens in technology, everything that now happens in technology is dependent upon the algorithm. And algorithms cannot exist without data. Your data, my data, everybody's data. And that data, by the way, unfortunately, has failed to be recognized by our leaders as proprietary. Data is proprietary. And until we start treating it that way in our legislative enactments and in our policies in this country, these oligarchs, these monopolists who control Facebook and Google and a few of the other companies are going to abuse it and hold it against us. It's totalitarianism in the form of big data. And we must break it up, and we must protect our data. We have to have a mindset, a paradigm set change. Data is more valuable than oil. Data is more valuable than oil. As much as our energy independence is of crucial importance to us today, and we can all see it with what's playing out on the world stage, data is as valuable. And we have to treat it as such, we have to protect it as such, and we need people in Washington like myself who understand what's going on and know how to get to the root of the problem.
Thank you. Jeff.
Rose, thank you for the question. But before I begin, I just want to thank Lohman and the entire team here at PLC. I want to thank all of you. This type of grassroots activism, this type of conservative activism that is the hallmark of PLC is what makes it slightly easier for all of us to do the hard work of campaigning across this huge state. So thank you to all of you for your activism and for being here today and for supporting all of us as we try to win this most important Senate seat. This is going to be the Senate seat that likely decides who controls the United States Senate in January of 2023. The stakes are very high, and thank you for all of your hard work. So this age-old problem, and it is an age-old problem, of trying to silence people that you don't agree with. For 35 years, I've been engaged in this fight at some level. Way back when, in college, when the advent of speech codes had just started. In the advent, right after the water buffalo incident at Penn, and universities all across the nation started putting in place speech codes that said you couldn't say anything that was offensive to anybody ever. By the way, none of that stood up to constitutional scrutiny, but that was the thing to do back in the late 80s and early 90s. And as the student body vice president at my alma mater, Emory University, I took on basically the entire school. I took on this speech code. I fought a year to get it removed, and we ultimately won after people protested outside my dorm room, and I was called all the names I get called today, actually. It hasn't changed in 35 years. I've lost a lot of hair and invested, lost, but we won't go into all that. But my point is that this fight that we're engaged in today is not a new fight. And I watched firsthand in 1993 and 1994, the left tries to silence us because they know, they won't admit it, but they know our ideas are better. They know our ideas are grounded in the Constitution, in the Declaration, in the Bible, in the Judeo-Christian values that underpin this entire great experiment in self-government. And so all they can do is try to silence us. So I agree with what's been said before. We should either remove Section 230 or we should otherwise break up these big tech companies through the antitrust process. But by the way, the fight will not be over. We win that argument. We win that battle. The war continues because at the end of the day, we have to fight for our Constitution. We win these fights. We win these fights because we have the Constitution, we have the people, and we have the history of our country behind us. But the left will never stop trying to silence us. Charles Murray, when he wrote in the early 90s. He wrote The Bell Curve. They tried to silence him then, and 30 years later, they tried to chase him off the stage at Dartmouth or one of those schools that he was chased off at. And if he's still writing books 20 years from now, which I hope he is, he'll be chased off again. Our children and grandchildren will be engaged in this battle, and it's up to us to continue to teach the next generation, the generation after that, how important these core American and constitutional rights are. I look forward to working with all of you for many years to come to continue this most important war, and we're going to win. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean?
So what we're seeing with big tech censorship is really part of cancel culture. That's what this really comes down to. And the reason we have cancel culture in this country is because of weak Republicans who don't stand up for conservative values. That's how we got into this situation. And you know what? It's a battle that's been going on for decades. Years ago, you used to hear about the Goldwater conservatives running against the Rockefeller Republicans. Those were the rhinos of yesteryear. And in 1980, we had a Goldwater conservative named Ronald Reagan running against a Rockefeller Republican named George H.W. Bush. And Ronald Reagan won that primary, went on to become president. And what we saw is under a true conservative president, the country flourished. But what was the lasting legacy of the Reagan administration? It was the Bush era of Republican politics. Because after Reagan in '88, we got George H.W. Bush, later his son George W., and really that continued with McCain and Romney until Donald Trump came along. And during that time, there was only one voice for conservatism we could rely on, and that was a guy on the radio named Rush Limbaugh for 33 years of broadcasting excellence. And now we've lost him. So we're really in uncharted territory. And in 2016, Donald Trump came along and he blew the doors off the Republican Party. And he rebranded it as this patriotic populist party with an America First agenda. And like we saw with Ronald Reagan, he was making America great again. And despite knowing that those policies were clearly working, we can see there's a push to go back to the era of Bush, McCain, and Romney, and we cannot go backward to move forward. But we see it's happening. It's happening right within the Republican National Committee. So if you said, who's the biggest never-Trumper in the country, the poster boy of the never-Trump movement? It's Mitt Romney, right? He voted to convict Trump twice. I think that gives him the title. Who's the head of the Republican National Committee? Ronna Romney McDaniel. It's his niece. It's good cop, bad cop. One fights for the North, one fights for the South, and no matter what happens, the Romneys are on the winning side. And under Ronna Romney McDaniel's leadership in 2018, Republicans lost control of the House. Then in 2020, they lose the Senate and presidency. Now, we would all say that was clearly a failure, yet she was just put in for 4 more years to continue to lead the party. So it goes to show you somebody was happy with that outcome. And really, this cancel culture took off in 2008 when Barack Obama was elected. Because the Republican Party ran the most liberal Republican senator against the most liberal senator in the entire Senate, Barack Obama. And it shifted the whole spectrum to the left. Then in 2012, it was Romney, kept it to the left. So much so that when Donald Trump came along in 2016, they had it like he was a right-wing nut job. He was a Democrat in the 90s. So this is the problem we have. And as your U.S. Senator, I'm going to champion conservative values, and I'm going to push back against cancel culture, whether it comes from big tech or anywhere else. That's what we need, a conservative with a backbone, and that's what I'm going to bring to Washington.
Thank you. And finally, Carla.
Finally. So you know what the good book says, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. This is also, I'll just say, God has prepared me for this moment. This is my Esther moment, because certainly I was prepared for such a time as this. I've been a conservative activist all my adult life. I was on the main stage at CPAC about a month ago talking about Pennsylvania energy and that I was running for the US Senate. And guess what? They censored my speech and President Trump's speech. They took them down off of YouTube. Censorship is real. While I was serving as your US ambassador and President Trump's personal representative in Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands, I was watching what was happening here at home, working for you there in Copenhagen, and I saw the cancellation of conservative voices. I saw them deplatform President Trump, and we all watched what the incoming Biden administration talked about, banning fracking, opening the southern border. And seeing what was happening was one of the reasons that I've run. Because it used to be many of us looked at big tech as sort of, they're private businesses. They can make their own decisions. It's a free market. But during the pandemic, they became the public square. And suddenly we realized, and certainly I did, that they need to be regulated like the phone company. Can you imagine if one of us in this room couldn't buy a cell phone because we're conservative? Well, that's what's happened to conservative voices on social media. I look at people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey of Facebook and Twitter, and I see modern-day totalitarians just like communist China. So we have to regulate big tech. Many Republicans and Democrats are on their payroll. They're the biggest lobby now. They have control of our representatives. I'm not going to take their money. I'll represent you, and I'll bring back free speech because we're going to regulate them like the phone company. We're going to get America First senators and congressmen elected this year, and we're taking back our free speech. We have to protect it. Even Elon Musk just came out recently and said, what's Twitter doing? If you don't have free speech in America, you can't have a constitutional republic. If America doesn't hold the line on this, and these companies are largely American companies, we're going to lose free speech around the world. And we know that China is trying to impose a totalitarian global governance and take over. We have to hold the line. Our American sovereignty matters.
Thank you.
Having America First representation in Washington matters. I will never back down. I will always be on the offense on your behalf. I did it putting forward America First policies every single day while I worked for you.
Hi.
Thank you.
All right. Let me just make one further explanation so our candidates and all of you know what's happening. We started with Kathy. So this next round of questions, we will start with Dr. Oz and walk back, and we will just work our way through every candidate here beginning a session. So John Gizzi will.
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff said earlier, there is a good chance that the race for the Senate in Pennsylvania may decide the majority in the United States Senate. And one of the things that one of you will thereupon vote on in the future, most likely, is a Supreme Court nominee. Right now, there is yet another nomination that is controversial and turbulent, the nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to succeed Justice Breyer. Let me ask all of you, how would you vote on the nomination of Judge Jackson to the Supreme Court, beginning with Dr. Oz?
I would vote against Judge Jackson. I watched part of the proceedings. How many of you would vote against Judge Jackson? Show of hands. I mean, from the get-go, it was a flawed process. The most important litmus test for me, as someone who firmly believes in the Constitution, is that the Supreme Court justices also believe in the Constitution, and that they make decisions based on what the Constitution would indicate. And I do not have confidence that Judge Jackson has those values, just evidenced by one simple interaction. I think that she's also been tainted by woke ideology, which I'd like to segue into, but the question of what is a woman, which, one thing I've learned over time is to give people a chance to answer the question. And in that dialogue, the senator asking the question quickly jumped in as she was about to hang herself, saying that she was not a doctor. I am a doctor, and I studied biology, and what defines a woman is pretty simple, right? Right? What defines a mother is pretty simple. Mothers give births, and they have organs that let them give birth. And one of the issues that I've been pretty vocal on during my campaign is taking back the language. Here's the reality. Republicans keep walking into woke knife fights with index cards. Fighting cultural wars with index cards is hard because they're armed with much more. When we're talking about minor changes to the tax code and far-left liberals, Marxists, are taking over our universities, the highest levels of industry. They're taking over media. And by the way, if you control industry and media and government, that's called the totalitarian rule, which is what we're witnessing right now. And I've been in these rooms and seen this happen firsthand. The reality for many is that we have to enter these discussions, even though it's not pleasant. We sort of assume our values and what everyone believes are intact, are in place. It's not true. The reason Washington keeps getting it wrong, and we'll be talking about all the things they're getting wrong over time, is because they don't share our values. Not just conservative people's values, but the values of the average American living in the Pennsylvania suburbs or Midland or in its urban areas. They just don't understand our values. They don't care about our values. They've been dominated by others. So we have got to get those values back on the agenda. And we lose control of these arguments by allowing folks who are ideologically driven to take control of our elements of our government. And the Supreme Court is a permanent decision. Judge Jackson will be there until she decides many years in the future to step down, and that is a risk for our country that we cannot afford to take. It's one of the reasons getting control back of the Senate is so vital, and having people with a bold, clear voice to argue these cultural issues in a thoughtful, assertive, not abrasive, but impactful way is what I spent my entire career doing. I will do that for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as your next senator, and we will make sure that we have the 51 votes needed to block future Judge Jacksons.
George.
I would, of course, vote against Judge Jackson, but let me explain to you my reasons. First and foremost, I believe, President Biden did that woman a terrible, terrible disservice. Why he felt it necessary to announce in advance that he was out there looking for an African-American woman to appoint is beyond me. It's almost the equivalent of him saying to Russia, we are not going to put our people into the Ukraine if you invade. It's the dumbest thing you could say, and it's a disservice to our national interests. If President Biden wanted to appoint an ultra-liberal to the bench, he should have just done so without signaling to the world, and of course to all of us, that he was going to make this terrible mistake. Judge Jackson, however nice a woman she may be and however hard she has struggled during her career, has made it very, very plain that she would favor an expansion of the Supreme Court to 15 members. That will pervert that institution indelibly and forever. If that kind of abuse takes place in this country at the hands of the left and at the hands of leftist Supreme Court justices, that institution is gone forever. And that is a very, very bad thing for this country. Secondly, she has signaled to us rather explicitly that she does not know the difference between a man and a woman. I'm not sure how that qualifies one to be on the Supreme Court, but I do know this. When the framers of the Constitution wrote the Constitution, they knew the difference between a man and a woman. And if you can't understand the difference between a man and a woman, how are you going to understand what is written in that Constitution, what was meant, and how we're supposed to order ourselves as people that are entitled to liberties and freedom and a limited federal government? So for these policy reasons, because we're here talking about policy, Jeff, I would not have voted, and I would not vote for Judge Jackson. But I do not hold it against her as much as I hold it against President Biden for the kind of senseless leadership or lack of leadership that he is putting this country through. And we are at a desperate time in this country. We need people to stand up. You talk about fighting cancel culture. I'm the guy that fought cancel culture on my own long before I ever decided to run for the Senate. I'm fighting the tearing down of Columbus statutes in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Syracuse and other cities. We need warriors. We need people that understand how to fight, have the experience, and can get it done. That's me.
Thank you. Jeff.
Well, pretty easy call here. I would vote also against Judge Jackson's nomination for two very clear reasons. Number one, Judge Jackson made it clear during her confirmation hearings that she's an activist. She's an activist judge. Her opinions show that she's an activist judge. She has a limited time on the Court of Appeals in the D.C. Circuit, but she does have a number of years on the bench at the district court level. She's an activist, and also her career and her decisions show that she's soft on crime. Now, for those of us who live in the Philadelphia area or the city of Philadelphia or the Philadelphia suburbs, we have watched firsthand over the last 4+ years what happens when someone comes into a really important office and then they are soft on crime even though they are charged to discharge their duties and protect the citizenry. We have a George Soros-funded district attorney in Philadelphia named Larry Krasner. Larry Krasner, and I know that we have people from Central PA, Western PA, we have a lot of Steelers fans in here probably. I'm an unapologetic Eagles fan. I know, go ahead and boo, it's fine. Flyers too. I know, in Pittsburgh I say that too, they throw things at me. I love Philadelphia. Cheryl and I raised our girls there. We've lived there for almost 25 years. And what Larry Krasner has done to our police force, what he has done to the citizenry, what he's done to the morale, he has systematically taken apart 30 years of hard effort to rebuild Philadelphia and the area around Philadelphia. And in 4+ years, he's taken it all apart. Carjackings up, murders up, rape, all sorts of horrible, violent crimes are on the rise in a place that I love with all my heart, and I know many of the people up here and many of you do too. That's what happens when we let activists, leftists, soft on crime leaders into positions of power. And that's why I would strongly oppose, if I was in the Senate, on the Judiciary Committee or on the floor of the Senate, I would fight like hell to stop this nomination. Our federal courts are the jewel of our system. I had the privilege to clerk for a federal judge. Cheryl and I lived as newlyweds up in Clark Summit in Lackawanna County. I clerked for a U.S. District Court judge there, appointed by President Clinton. And I can tell you, in a year of clerking for him, we never once talked politics. I mean, we did, occasionally joust about things, but never once did politics come into the decisions that we were making on that court. The world has changed so much since the late 90s in terms of that activist bent of the far left. My judge, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he would be very, very disappointed to see what passes today for these types of appointments. And I'm making sure, with that experience, with that focus, with living through the nightmare that is a crime-ridden, district attorney-driven Philadelphia that has lost its ability to defend the citizenry, I will oppose those types of nominations with all of my heart.
Well, I would not vote to confirm Judge Jackson. But I watch these confirmation hearings, and I see all the Republicans, Ted Cruz, asking the tough questions. I think I only wish they did that when it was a Republican nominee as well, and then maybe we would have better judges on the court. Because we have a 6-3 conservative majority on the bench, and I don't know about you, but it doesn't feel like it. We can't win a case. We have this Chief Justice, John Roberts. He votes with the Democrats on every single issue. He's the reason we have Obamacare. He was a Bush appointee. A Reagan appointee, Anthony Kennedy, is the reason we have gay marriage in this country. And I just saw a case recently. It was over vaccine mandates for Navy SEALs. And Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh joined with Roberts and the Democrats to uphold that vaccine mandate. So again, that's our issue. It's weak Republicans. And as your U.S. Senator, I'm going to hold both Republican nominees and Democrat nominees that get appointed to our judgeships and make sure they are constitutional conservatives, because that's what we deserve on our courts, and we're not getting that right now.
Can you hear me? It would be hard for me to vote in favor of any Biden nominee. Let me explain why. Not only did this Supreme Court Justice nominee not define a woman, she wouldn't admit when life began, when she was asked directly, under questioning. We have a war against our traditional American values by the hard left. The Joe Biden administration is not the Democrat Party of John F. Kennedy. This is the party of Bernie Sanders and AOC, and they are Marxist. And they're attempting to destroy our families, our values, the difference between men and women, our children's innocence. You saw Joe Biden nominate to the Fed and Treasury one woman who was an avowed Marxist who said, we're going to federalize all the banks. We saw another nominee say, we're going to debank energy companies. Can you imagine? Within a few days, we would not be able to drive our cars, heat our homes, or run our businesses. These are radicals being nominated by the Biden administration. No, I wouldn't vote for his Supreme Court nominee. And we are very weak as a party because we have so many weak Republicans in Washington who go along to get along. They don't hold the line against the hard left. They think compromise is the order of the day. But let me tell you something. We keep compromising, and they keep taking. It is time for us to step up and take our country back. There are many more of us than there are of them. We are now coming out of the churches and out of our homes, and we're coming back to the public square, and we're saying we're done. We're taking our country back, and we're not going back to what this radical administration is trying to do. And there are so many Republicans that are helping them. We need to defeat them. We need to take back our country, take back our constitutional rights, elect conservative judges, America First senators and congressmen, and then in 2024, we need to elect a conservative America First president. We are taking our country back. We are not going to, I will certainly not, vote to confirm any of the radical Biden nominees. Thank you.
Okay, so you start with George.
All right,
Yes.
so
Kathy.
Yes, Rose. I know. Wait. Start my time back. Rose missed my name. Go back to three. Okay, listen. Democrats engage in what I call oppression Olympics. It's all about how oppressed are you. And the more oppressed you are, then the more virtuous you are, right? So Biden says we're going to elect a black woman. Okay, what about a black woman with a limp? What about a black woman with a limp and a lazy eye? Because for Democrats, it's all about how oppressed you are, right? I believe qualifications should trump cosmetics. And I'm saying that as a black woman, right? It should. And one of the qualifications should be, have you read the U.S. Constitution? Do you have respect for the U.S. Constitution, right? And what we saw as a display, yes, I saw her, and yes, I do agree that it was a disservice, right? Because no matter if she was perfect and get into office, we're all gonna have in our mind, you got that position because you're black and because you're a woman, right? America used to be a land of, our motto was, bring us your best and your brightest. Today, it's all about bring us somebody who's not whitey, right? We don't want any white people. The less white you are, then the better. I think that's racist, personally. Again, it should be about qualifications. Because I believe our nation is having a crisis of identity. We're in an identity crisis. Who in the world are we? Democrats have blown past socialism. They're straight up communists. There's an element, not all Democrats. I'm the only out of the closet Republican in my family. Except for my husband. I would have never married him. True story. But the rest of my family on both sides, they're Democrats, and they're wonderful people. And if they voted their values, they too would be a Republican, right? So I'm not speaking about all Democrats, but there is a very radicalized left within the Democrat Party, and we need to be very real about that. And as a result, our nation is in a crisis of identity. Who are we? Do we have borders? Are we a sovereign nation? Can we, I literally got emotional, and if you understand my story of how I was conceived, you understand why. Of people, we're now talking about post-abortion, after the child has been born. Who in the world are we? Not only does Ms. Jackson know that she's a woman, Biden knows she's a woman, and not a woman subjectively, because he picked a woman who is a woman objectively, right? They know the truth. We know the truth. We just got to get a backbone, get some courage, muster it up, and start speaking it. Our values are the better values. We just have to start speaking it out loud. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to try to squeeze 2 questions into one for the sake of time, but they both have to do with China. The first one is we saw how mishandled the coronavirus outbreak was, and we also saw that it hurt the economies and lives were lost. Should we hold China accountable, and if so, how? And my second question about China is, do we or should we have a military response to defend Taiwan? Do we have an obligation to defend Taiwan? I've heard strategic ambiguity used before, and we know where that gets us. So we'll start with you, George, if you don't mind answering those 2 questions.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
And of course, China and the issue of China is of such vital existential importance to this country. I can't help but notice, however, that here we have a gathering of Pennsylvania's core conservatives, the most influential group in our Commonwealth, and the opportunity to address them. And I am so proud to be here. But there's one person who's not here, who didn't think that his schedule was important enough to come and address the most important group in Pennsylvania that there is. And let me tell you this, I think it's because he knew the subject of China was going to come up.
We did all agree that we would not
Very well.
attack other candidates, especially
China is an existential threat to this country. Why? Because we have participated in this globalist philosophy, which means that we must be part of a broader system to get the things that we are dependent upon in order for our national security and sustenance. So we are now dependent upon China and Taiwan for 75% of our semiconductors. Semiconductors run our country. They are the twin brother of data. If we don't control the data, we're lost as a country. If we don't control semiconductors, we're lost as a country. And we have ceded control over this vital aspect of our national security to the Chinese. And we need people who are willing to stand up to the Chinese, who are not beholden to the Chinese Communist Party, and who understand what the problems are. Do we need more positioning with respect to China and Taiwan? Of course we do. Taiwan, we have an obligation to defend. We should go on record now that confirms we are going to defend Taiwan. We are going to do what it takes to prevent the kind of incursion in Taiwan that's taken place with the Ukrainians. The Biden administration completely mishandled Putin and how to handle the Russian aggression. We should not make the same mistake when it comes to China and Taiwan. When it comes to COVID, is there any more of a reason to want to hold China responsible for what's happened to this country and around the world than to see the kind of recklessness with which they have approached the COVID pandemic and put it upon all of us to have to deal with? We want restitution, we want answers, we want solutions.
Time. Thank you.
Well, George, that candidate you were talking about, I think you're being a little rough there. I think the traffic to get from Connecticut to Harrisburg on a weekend is terrible. And I'm told, I don't have my own, but I'm told that grade A jet fuel is also very expensive these days. So, George, I love you, but I think you're being a little harsh. So let me take it in reverse order, Rose. I think it's a great question. First of all, the sons and daughters of Main Street, Pennsylvania, really, we need to think solemnly and very hard before we send any of them into harm's way. There is a way to defend Taiwan without having to commit American troops. President Zelensky and the Ukrainians were asking for months before the obvious invasion happened for anti-ship, anti-tank, drone, and all sorts of offensive and defensive weapons. We have a great relationship with the Taiwanese. They have a strong, proud people with a strong and well-disciplined army, but we need to get them more anti-ship. The Chinese, if they were to attack Taiwan, it would have to be from amphibious. It would have to be. And so get them more anti-ship weapons, get them all the weapons that they need today to defend their homeland, and the Taiwanese will do exactly what the Ukrainians are doing, which is standing up for freedom, standing up and defending their homeland. Sovereignty matters. Courage matters. Now, I'll digress for a second or divert for a second. There was a poll recently asking Americans, would you step up to defend your freedom if the United States were invaded? Over 50% of Democrats, said no. They'd leave the country. I mean, staggering. The Taiwanese will do exactly what the Ukrainians do, and rest assured, President Xi is watching. With respect to COVID, and Dr. Oz will know this better because he knows the medical response and the pandemic response, but I'll speak to it briefly. Our pandemic response, prior to watching the Chinese shut down their country as a totalitarian state, was never to do lockdowns. It was judged, looking back at the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, lockdowns didn't work. And yet, as we saw those images coming out of Wuhan and other places in China, it was the geniuses, bureaucrats, and Democratic governors, Gavin Newsom first, but we had the worst governor here in the country here in Tom Wolf. The shutdowns came because they watched what the Chinese were doing. Think about that. Our elected leaders in California and New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and other places looked at what the Chinese were doing and thought, well, that's working pretty well, we'll do that. And the destruction. I started a whole nonprofit to save small businesses. My nonprofit, the nonprofit we had, the 30-Day Fund to save Main Street small businesses, was not needed in Florida or Tennessee or Texas or South Carolina, places where the governors looked at the science and said, this isn't working, we're going to open up. Here we didn't do that. The destruction across Main Streets was terrible. We should absolutely sue the Chinese Party, the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Republic of China, but good luck collecting on that.
Yeah.
So let's be honest. The issues we're having globally is because we have a weak president, tremendously weak president. And the way we left Afghanistan was a disgrace. And it was a disgrace for the whole world to see. Just leaving military equipment behind. And it sent a message that when America's weak, the world is unstable, and it's a time for opportunities like China moving into Taiwan. That's what we're seeing right now. So what we need is a strong domestic policy. The best foreign policy is a strong domestic policy. And the issues we've had with China, this has been going on for decades. I remember growing up, I'd hear my grandparents, my parents, aunts and uncles. They talk about jobs being outsourced to China and India. They talk about illegal immigrants coming across the border and taking American jobs here. But you turned on the TV, and I didn't care if it was a Republican or a Democrat. They'd say, well, those are jobs Americans don't want. That's why we're outsourcing them. And then Donald Trump came along, and he said, you know what? We do want these jobs. We have to bring manufacturing back to America. We have to bring energy right here. We're buying energy from countries that hate us. That is not good foreign policy. That is not good national security. We should be getting our energy from right here in Pennsylvania. That's what we should be doing. And number one, national security starts at the border. And I love to see it now. You have all these Republicans are all down at the border, and they have a big sign. It says Biden's border crisis. They're saying, Kamala Harris, get down here and fix this immediately. But what did they do when they had control? They fought Donald Trump every step of the way. Pat Toomey voted against funding the border wall. So if I was down at the border, I'd have a big sign too. But mine would say Toomey's border crisis, because that's who I hold responsible. Not the Democrats who run on open borders. They don't care about drugs and disease and illegals coming across. That's what they promised us. Yeah. I blame the Republicans who promised us border security, and when we gave them the majorities to do it, and a president who was more than willing to do it, they failed to get it done. That's what I'm going to change. I'm going to hold the bad Republicans accountable, and I'll tell you this. I promise you this here today. I am not another Pat Toomey. We cannot afford that. After 30 years of oral inspector, we deserved better, and we got the same darn thing.
So I'm happy to say to all of you that I'm the only person on this stage who's been America First since 2016. I worked hard to help President Trump get elected, contributed, raised funds for him, worked with the grassroots, and I'm the only one on this stage that actually worked in his administration. I worked for him as his personal representative, the US ambassador to Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands, working for all of you in this room. And I worked to increase jobs because we know that many jobs here in Pennsylvania have gone offshore, and we've watched it over the last 4 decades. Our Commonwealth has hollowed out since I was a teenager. We watched cities and towns that were 30,000 people go to 5,000, and manufacturing move away, and thriving places become very depressed. We have to turn that around. I created jobs while I was your ambassador. I increased our trade with Denmark over 43%, and we became the #1 trading partner in 4 of those quarters that I served. I also worked to counter China and Russia. We worked to counter Russia. I actually, with my team, closed down and stopped the completion of that Russian gas pipeline called Nord Stream 2. The only place it wasn't completed was in my area of responsibility. And I worked to counter China and Russia in the high north. I banned with my team all of Chinese-made 5G and telecom equipment in Denmark, Greenland, and we were working on the Faroe Islands. Thank you. My work to counter Russia and China was so complete that the Department of Defense gave me their highest civilian honor, the Medal for Distinguished Public Service. I was relentless, they said, in my diplomacy to put America first and defend our country. We know that China caused this virus to come out of Wuhan. This is open source. The Communist Chinese Party closed the flights from Wuhan to the rest of China, but they opened the flights from Wuhan to the rest of the world and spread this virus intentionally. The Chinese Communist Party gives about 10% of what the United States gives to the World Health Organization every year. We give about $500 million a year. They give around 40 or 50. And yet they set the agenda and have control of leadership in the World Health Organization, largely the UN. They're working on the World Trade Organization, and certainly they are spreading totalitarianism and trying to implement their kind of very malign governance. They told the rest of the world, allow those flights to come out from Wuhan through the World Health Organization, so it had credibility. We must hold them accountable for what they did to the loss of life here in our country and also the loss of our businesses. We know that Taiwan is under stress from China. It's because we don't have a strong president and leadership in the White House. I believe in Ronald Reagan's peace through strength. With a strong president in the White House, Russia would never have invaded. Thank you very much.
So you call on that.
Yeah. I believe we teach people how to treat us, right? And I just jotted down as I was thinking some of the things of what we've taught world leaders, what we've done and what they could be learning from it. I remember when Obama had that red line. Remember that red line that turned into a little pink squiggly line? I remember, when Russia did what they call a fait accompli, when they invaded Georgia and then they annexed Crimea, and all Obama did was send pillows. Remember that? Remember when China took over Hong Kong? What did we do? Remember when China intentionally released COVID onto the world stage? It's open source. We know that that happens. Killing over 900,000 Americans. Have they been held accountable for that yet? So what is the world learning from that? Remember when we just had a botched exit out of Afghanistan and we saw our people running behind the plane? Last I heard, we have 9,000 Americans still over there, and yet we're told, shut up, be quiet, go to sleep, everything is well. Now we're looking at Ukraine and Russia and the horror the blood that is being spilled, the millions of dollars that's being wasted or that's being sent over there right now. What have we taught the world, right? What the previous administration showed us is that you get peace through decisive strength. What this administration is showing us is that you get war with weakness, right? The rest of the world sees what you and I see. Biden is incompetent. Biden is weak. Biden is undisciplined, and he has surrounded himself with some of the most inferior talent who is consistently having breaks from reality. Like, what world are these people living in, right? The other day, I know I keep harping on Biden, but the other day, literally, I'm sitting there. His new goal is to put a black woman on the moon. We're about to have food shortages in this country. There is no ceiling on gas prices. There's no ceiling on this inflation. We placed ourselves in a catch-22. I talked to one of our largest farmers in the agriculture industry here in Pennsylvania. He said, you know what? If prices start going down, if inflation goes down, we're going to be hurt because of my input cost and all of this. Let me get to Taiwan with my last couple of seconds here. We have a first chain obligation. They call it the first island chain. It's a parallel wall that goes from Japan all the way down into South China Sea. And it protects us because China is trying to move westward and take over. Why should we care? Because more than 80% of our semiconductors come from Taiwan. More than 20% of the world trade flows through that particular strait. If they take control over that, we're going to be on our hands and knees, people. It's not going to be pretty. What we should do with China is what Biden should have done with Russia. It'd be very strong. China has zero oil. They need to get it from Middle East. We need to let them know we're about to put a block on the Makila Straits. We're going to hold you accountable. Okay.
You all may not realize it, but China has already declared war on us. We see it in how they've infiltrated our universities, buying chairs for $1 million so they can have someone on the inside. We see it how they take over our sports leagues. Try raising China as an issue in the NBA. Right? LeBron Jackson has no problem talking about that stuff in America, but you talk about China, won't bring it up. LeBron James, sorry. You have major flaws with how industry looks at what China is doing. We can't raise it in our arts anymore, right? You make movies, it comes up continually. And here's the part that continues to shock me. We see major leaders making decisions that kowtow to China, right? The reason Beijing Dave is not here is because he built the biggest hedge fund in China for over $1 billion. Why? Because they could make more money there, they thought, than here. Our Commonwealth lost more jobs than any other state in America, mainly because they were outsourced overseas. Much of it, by the way, by corporate leaders, with Beijing Dave playing a role, that allowed us, and we tolerated it. So I think you're right. We teach people how to treat us. And we have taught the Chinese they can subvert what we're up to. And with COVID, they took it to a whole new level. Because with COVID, they knew for sure that this virus was transmissible through breathing, and they didn't tell us. They knew about this virus weeks before they allowed anyone else to even begin to investigate it. They hid the source of the virus. And you know why our government tolerated it? They extorted us. I know this from inside. They told the White House that if they didn't cut it out with the hard China talk, they were going to shut out our protective gear. And you know why they could do that? Because they make all the protective gear. We wouldn't have been able to protect ourselves. Does that make you angry? Yeah. So I was sitting there talking about this stuff on a lot of different programs. There's Sean Hannity, who, as you know, has endorsed me. That was one of the first times we worked closely because I was saying exactly what I was seeing, and I got canceled because I started talking about the things that we were doing wrong, even though we knew, even at that early stage, that things like closing schools didn't matter. And yet so much of our dialogue was perverted because we're held hostage by China. But here's the deal. The rest of the world, and my show's in 100 countries. I go on and I travel. These guys are making a decision right now. We're not just fighting for the soul of Pennsylvania with this campaign. We're fighting for the soul of our country and the soul of the world, because here's their calculus. They see a democracy like America's, right, that's built a capitalistic system that under the Trump administration was thriving. And then they see a totalitarian, overreaching, domineering society where you can't say anything that's given rise to an economy that's doing okay. And the world's saying, am I going to choose America, the shining city on the hill, or do I go with China? If we don't thrive and win and beat China, they will take over the world, and it'll be our fault.
Okay. Let me change one thing slightly here. We're going to do one more round of questions. John will ask the last question. And if we could ask our candidates to keep your answers limited to 1 minute instead of 3. And then we'll get to closing statements. Okay?
Everybody here, in his or her own way, has a relationship with President Trump. Do you think that would you like to have Donald Trump's endorsement in the primary? And if you're the nominee, will you ask him to come to Pennsylvania and campaign for you? Jeff.
That's the easiest question we're going to get all day. Yes, 100% yes. Since I have a minute, I'm going to talk a little longer. My whole campaign from day one has been about saving Main Street, Pennsylvania. In our launch video a year ago, I said, it was unscripted, it was very from the heart, I said that Donald Trump represented for millions of Pennsylvanians someone listening for the first time in generations. And we cannot go back to a time when career politicians in Washington thought of Pennsylvania as 2 giant cities and a whole lot of farmland in between. Now, all of us have had the privilege to travel around this magnificent Commonwealth. For me, 5 years, others less, but we all have seen the impact that the Trump administration's policies had on main streets across all 67 counties. It's amazing what just 3 short years ago, we had the best economy in our lifetimes. The Chinese were concerned what we were going to do next. Russia, which is a gas station with an army, would never have thought of attacking a neighbor. The Trump administration's policies were working domestically, internationally. We had energy, not only independence, but as Carla says, energy dominance. We can get back to that starting with this election in November.
So I believe that Donald Trump is the best president this country has ever had, and I would welcome his endorsement. That said, if I was advising Donald Trump, I would say stop endorsing candidates. It's not working. In this race, he endorsed Sean Parnell, and 2 months later, he was out of the race. That's a bad reflection on President Trump. And if you look at his history of endorsing candidates, you name a never-Trumper, Trump's endorsed them. He endorsed John McCain over John McCain's primary challenger. He endorsed Paul Ryan over Paul Ryan's primary challenger. He endorsed Mitt Romney in Utah. He endorsed Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins. So he tried to work with these people, and all they did was stab him in the back. And there's this expression, they say, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. That's terrible advice. Because when you bring your enemies close to you, that's how you get stabbed in the back. And one thing about Donald Trump is that guy has been stabbed in the back more than anybody in history. So my advice to him would be, watch your back.
As I said earlier, I'm the only person on this stage that actually personally worked with President Trump and worked for him, for all of you, worked with him in the Oval Office on important issues, worked to counter Russia and China, and ready on day one. There's no one else in this race on either side that's ready on day one to fight for you. And if you haven't decided who you're going to support, I hope that you will support Carla Sands for the U.S. Senate, because I'm ready on day one. I'll never back down, and I will always put America first. Of course, I'd be honored to have President Trump's endorsement. We all would. However, I really want the endorsement of the voters of Pennsylvania. I will fight for them to rejuvenate our Commonwealth. I'll work to bring back energy dominance, and we're going to start right here in Pennsylvania. I called on the main stage at CPAC for Operation Warp Speed to bring back American energy. We're second only to Texas, and we have so many beautiful resources, healthcare, universities, and our energy in the ground, enough for 300 years to power the entire United States.
Time.
Yes, I would love to get President Trump's endorsement. And yes, I believe he is one of the greatest presidents we have ever had. You know, I am traveling, my campaign and I, we are traveling over 1,500 miles a week. No one has the kind of grassroots campaign that we have, and I can see it when I walk into the room, and I know the overwhelming majority of you in this room, right? And what I am finding that people feel squeezed right now. People feel unnerved, people feel unsure. We're dealing with very real problems right now, and we need someone who will fight for us. My entire life has proven the fact that I understand what it is that I'm fighting for. When I start talking about my introduction, I'll share a little bit, or the closing, I'll share a little bit more with you about that. I understand what we're about to lose. We're about to lose the greatest country that has ever existed. And people looked at President Trump because of what he accomplished, and he accomplished a lot.
President Trump has accomplished. I would welcome his endorsement. I actually did have a role in the administration. I was appointed to the President's Council of Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition, not once, but twice, until Joe Biden tried fecklessly to try to fire me about a week ago. You probably followed the saga. He can't even fire a person as well as Donald Trump. And what was most amazing is when I first got the email from the White House, I actually thought that Biden got it wrong. He was trying to fire Fauci, a doctor that he should have fired. They couldn't quite figure out why they were firing me. First, they made up one rule, the Hatch Act. That wasn't right. They made another rule up that they had an internal rule, but they couldn't produce it. Now the newspapers are interested in, what's going on here. Then the president finally personally fired me. And I actually brought this up to President Trump, who sort of smiled about it and chortled and then just broke into a laugh because it's so emblematic of the incompetence of the Biden administration and so reflective of how the decisiveness of the Trump administration allowed our country to thrive. Him coming to Pennsylvania to support one of us would mean the world.
Well, I've already received the endorsement of President Trump. I got that endorsement when he was facing his second impeachment trial in the United States Senate, when the woke mob from the left tried to engineer and manufacture a false narrative against him. And who did the Trump team reach out to explain and itemize for the United States Senate the president's First Amendment rights, the very foundation upon which this country is built? The freedom of expression, the freedom to express yourself in whatever popular or unpopular way that there may be. And when Donald Trump was put to the metal, when he was facing existential banishment from politics, remember what they were trying to do by impeaching him. He was already out of office. They were trying to ban him from ever coming back. And who did Donald Trump turn to? George Bochetto. So I've already got his endorsement. Thank you very much.
So we're closing statements, right? Okay. So we're going to now move into closing statements, and we will start with Sean.
Look, I realize I'm going to be one of 100 U.S. senators. I can't tell you I'm going to go down and single-handedly build a border wall myself. I can't make that pledge. And there are other conservatives. Ted Cruz is a constitutional conservative with a pristine voting record on all the issues. I'd probably vote like Ted Cruz. But what Ted Cruz isn't that I am is a disruptor to the system. I'm going there not only to hold the Democrats accountable, but those bad Republicans who have failed us time and time again. Guys like Mitch McConnell, majority leader, now minority leader. He's been there for 36 years, 79 years old, just got elected to 6 more years. If he hasn't got it done yet, he's not going to get it done now. But nobody has a backbone to stand up to him. And what President Trump should have done is he should have said, you know what, Mitch? I promise people at my rallies I'm going to make America great again, which means repealing and replacing Obamacare, which means building the border wall. And guess what, Mitch? You're the head of the Republican-controlled Senate, which means it's your job to get it done. And if you don't get it done, I'm going to hold my rallies in your state of Kentucky, and I'm going to tell your constituents you're the reason why it's not happening. Then it would have got done. Well, thank you. You interrupted my momentum here. But you know what? That's what it comes down to. Because when you hold these swamp rats accountable, that's what they're going to do. Because they will do anything to get reelected. And if that means passing the conservative agenda, yeah, they'll get that done too. But let's say McConnell didn't get it done. Guess what would have happened? Donald Trump would have been reelected, and Mitch McConnell would not have been reelected. And if you have any doubt about that, just ask yourself, who's the other senator from Kentucky? It's Rand Paul. Now, there's a big difference between Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell, isn't there? So we know there's an appetite amongst the voters of Kentucky to get rid of a guy like McConnell. There's just not an appetite to do so in Washington, and as your next U.S. Senator, I'll be bringing that appetite there. Now, the issue that put me in this race, the straw that broke the camel's back, was Pat Toomey's ultimate betrayal. And that's when he voted to convict Donald Trump at that bogus hearing back in February 2021. So he did that February 13th. I announced my candidacy 3 days later on the 16th. And it was interesting because the Pennsylvania Republican Party had a vote on whether or not to censure Pat Toomey for his vote to convict Donald Trump. And they voted not to censure him. Now, these are the same people, the same body, who's supposed to vet and endorse the candidate who replaces Pat Toomey. So they told us what we're going to get. Pat Toomey 2.0, just like Pat Toomey was Arlen Specter 2.0. And I hope if nothing else is clear from my talk here today, I am not another Pat Toomey. We cannot afford another backstabbing rhino in Washington. We have plenty of them.
Just to be clear, there's no question that Donald Trump was the greatest president in my lifetime, and I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican. I'm also a pro-life, pro-First Amendment, pro-Second Amendment, constitutional conservative, America first, businesswoman and Christian and mom. In addition, so I'm from here in Cumberland County. I practiced alongside my dear father, who just had open heart surgery 3 days ago, Dr. Jack Hurd, as a third-generation doctor of chiropractic, but my first real job was at Hershey Park. Yes, and I'm an eighth-generation Pennsylvanian, and my Pennsylvania ancestors fought in the American Revolution and in the Civil War, and all of us in this room know that this is our time to fight for the heart and soul of our great nation. And I'm the only one in this race that helped President Trump get elected in 2016 and worked in his administration as his ambassador to Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands, working, like I said, to counter Russia and counter China, working to ban Chinese and Russian malign behavior in the high north. And I put a consulate in Greenland, got a Coast Guard billet for Denmark for Arctic security, did trade and cooperation agreements with the Faroese and with Greenlanders, and many other efforts, secured our base, the most northern base above the North Pole. And I did receive that award from the DoD. But it was while I was working as your ambassador that I knew I had to run, that I knew we were losing our country to the hard left, and they were not going to back down. And I know that I will always be on the offense, that I will never back down. We send so many weak Republicans to represent us, and that's how we're losing our country and our freedoms. Our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, and our many constitutionally protected rights. As your U.S. Senator, I will work to fix what's going on in Washington. First of all, our seniors and our working families are under so much duress from the inflation that the radical Biden administration has caused with their multi-trillion-dollar bills, and the Green New Deal stuffed in is a war against our Pennsylvania energy and our Pennsylvania farmers. I will work to reverse that, to stop the out-of-control spending. I'll also work to secure our border, to stop the illegal immigrants and record amounts of fentanyl that is coming over our border and killing our young. We also know that we do not want our kids to be indoctrinated with critical race theory or any other kind of name they want to give it. We will protect our children. I will ban it at the federal level. We need to send strong America First Republicans to Washington to help save our country. I hope when you pump your gas at the gas station and you see that high price, you think of me, because I'm going to bring that price down. I'm going to be your energy senator. We're going to do Operation Warp Speed. They're going to have to, because we cannot import gas and oil from countries like Venezuela, Iran, and Russia. We need to do it right here from home. We'll lay the pipes. Please vote for Carla Sands on May 17th. Thank you.
Last night, Trey Gowdy gave us, what a wonderful message, right? And he gave us I went to bed thinking about it, and I woke up thinking about it. What do you believe? and why, right? I know what I believe. I believe many things, but specifically, I believe this is the greatest country that has ever existed. And I believe America is the greatest country that has ever existed because we were founded upon the greatest political document ever written, the U.S. Constitution. But our country is hanging on a precipice right now. I mean, this thing really can go either way, right? And I know that my story only takes place here in America. I was born on a pig farm in southern Alabama. I was born below the bottom rung of the economic ladder. I grew up in a home with no insulation, no running water, an outhouse in the back and a well on the side. When I say poor, we couldn't afford the other O. We were just po. But, I mean, we were. It was so crazy. You know, my grandmother would ask me to help her in the garden, and I thought she just wanted to spend quality time with me. It wasn't until I grew up that I realized that that in part was for our survival. If we wanted beans or greens or potatoes, I know exactly what it is. This country has allowed me to be able to claw my way from underneath the rock and to be able to create a new life for me and my families. My babies have no idea what it feels like to sit in a dark room because my single parent mother cannot pay for both the rent and the light bills. America allowed me to do that. So many other people, you know, I'm all across this Commonwealth, I'm talking to all kinds of people, and I hear this story over and over and over again. But that America is about to come to a close. We either get this right now or God help us. He said yesterday, last night, Trey Gowdy, we need people who have the ability to persuade. We have the best message to tell. We have the best story to tell. We just keep picking people who suck at telling it. We got to start picking better people to tell our story. No one has a story like us. We're not perfect, but there is no one running a close second. When I walk through that door, my very presence neutralizes more than half of Democrats' talking points. That is power in the hands of a Republican Party. Democrats are going to come out with guns blazing. I don't care how much money you have, right? We keep picking people who are the richest person in the room. Y'all know that doesn't matter, or else we'll be saying, Madam President Hillary Clinton. We need people who will fight for us. Thank you.
So my middle name is Persuasion. I've been doing it on television in your living rooms for many years, but let me tell you why I got into the business. I had no interest in doing television. I'm a heart surgeon. My wife, Lisa, honey, please stand. Lisa, she hates doing this, but I'll point it out. The reason Lisa is the reason is because you remember those Visine commercials with the bloodshot eyes? They're her eyes. And so when we were newlyweds, the best thing I ever did in my life was to marry Lisa 36 years ago in the house we live in now outside of Philadelphia. I realized that I'd made a decision that would be impactful for more than the reasons I thought. And yeah, we raised 4 wonderful children and got grandkids, but what was really special was Lisa would point out the flaws, the narrative that was being stolen from us. See, I grew up in this town just outside of the mushroom capital of the world, Pettit Square. You all know where that is? Right? So less than 10 miles from there. My dad, who was an immigrant, and Kathy, similar to yours, we grew up not much. My dad grew up living on a dirt floor, got to this country because we allowed legal immigration. He became a doctor, and we wanted a brain drain coming to us. So he was allowed in the 50s to come here because we didn't have enough doctors. And he would tell me, don't grow up and become a mushroom, right? Don't sit in the dark all day long, get fed manure, and then get canned at the end of it all. And I went to school because he told me I needed to study my hardest. He never told me I was smart. He told me if you work hard, you'll succeed. That's the American way. When I was 8 years old, it was a Nixon-Humphrey campaign, and I got home and he told me, we're going to be Republicans. And I said, why, Dad? He says, Republicans have better ideas. And we do. We just have to let them sing for us. So I grew up and went to med school at Penn, business school at Wharton. I invented little devices, catheters to fix heart valves that are now widely used. But I understand as an entrepreneur how difficult it is to get simple things done because of the regulatory apparatus. And when I finally got through it all, and Lisa convinced me to do television, and we made the #1 health show in the world for 13 years running, the reason I decided that it was time for us to move, because we're in the change business, to move into changing how we think and how persuade people to become conservatives like us, is because we found our values undermined. And here are my values. It's all about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Life, because it starts at conception, and then it continues through childhood, where they deserve to be protected from hearing values and ideas around gender and everything else until the parents think they're ready for it, through an education that prepares them to actually play a living role in society, through some kind of bond formation, making kids, and then into old age when they have health care. Pursue the liberties about the First Amendment we've talked about, but the Second Amendment as well, because that's there to protect the other amendments. And I believe every law-abiding American citizen ought to own a gun of their desire, and find the pursuit of happiness, which is capitalism, free access to energy, in fact, energy dominance, and the right to lead the world as we have throughout our history.
Thank you. You know, everybody here wants to have the mantle of being a fighter, but they sometimes forget that I was the boxing commissioner in Pennsylvania all those years. And I started fighting from the very first moment of my life when I was an orphan and left on the orphanage steps to grow up in the orphanage system and in the foster care system. So I had to learn to fight soon. I had to learn how to fight smart. And, you know, I listened to Trey Gowdy's address last night, too, and I was equally as impressed as the others. But here's what I heard Trey Gowdy communicate to us. You persuade by doing. You don't persuade by talking or saying the other person can do it. You persuade by doing. And I think that everybody in this room and everybody in this Commonwealth ought to look at each of our records. What have we been doing all of our adult life? Well, I can tell you what I've been doing. At my own expense, I've been fighting cancel culture long before I wanted to run for the Senate. When they came to tear down the statutes in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, I went to court. I sued the Democratic woke mayors. I put up the money to fight them. I got the injunctions. When a cop killer wanted to be sprung out of jail by Larry Krasner, I didn't just talk about it. I petitioned the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, intervened in the case, and made sure Larry Krasner couldn't spring that guy loose. When Donald Trump needed to be defended, and I'm sitting in Philadelphia, and everybody in Philadelphia, all those woke Democrats, wanted to hang Donald Trump from the nearest tree, who did they call on to defend Donald Trump? Me. I'm a fighter. I've been doing it my entire life. I haven't adopted positions just because it's convenient now in these times, or I want to run for political office. I've been doing it my entire life. I'm proud to stand for what I stand for. I'm not running for Senate for my own aggrandizement. I am running to continue to give to this Commonwealth what I have done for my entire professional career. Help others in Pennsylvania, help others in this country, stand up for the right things, fight, and be American. And that's what I heard Trey Gowdy say, and that's why I'm running for Senate.
Well, again, I just want to thank you. As you can see from all the folks up here on stage, every single candidate up here, and we have great candidates, every single candidate up here is leaps ahead of what the Democrats are going to put up in May. Leaps ahead. Light years ahead. And so we're going to win this election in November. Look, I'm a lifelong resident of this Commonwealth. My wife, Cheryl, grew up in Lehigh County. I grew up in Berks County. We raised our two girls, Emily and Sarah, in the Philadelphia suburbs. I was proud to have been your nominee back in 2018 for Lieutenant Governor. Scott and I worked so hard, but forget about us. It's all of you. You made that campaign possible. And we were asked at a forum a couple months ago, what's my biggest professional regret? And I said, it's what we couldn't get it done for all of you. Because what we've seen over the last 2 years, and really over the last 8 years of the Wolf administration, is a systematic taking apart of our home. This great commonwealth that we're all privileged to call home. And it's because of that life experience, but working here in the Commonwealth my whole life, being your candidate for lieutenant governor back in 2018, that experience allowed me, when the chips were down and we were all shut down in the spring of 2020, to look around and say, I have to do something. And I think I can. Inspired by my friend Pete Snyder in Virginia, who had launched something similar, I started a nonprofit called the Pennsylvania 30-Day Fund. Through those efforts, and I want to say I led those efforts, but it happened because of dozens of volunteers, over 1,000 donors, great people across Pennsylvania and across the country for that matter. We raised $3.5 million and helped over 1,000 women and men keep the lights on in their small businesses, keep the dream of owning their own business alive, and as important or more important, save thousands and thousands of jobs for working families. My campaign for the United States Senate, the beating heart of this campaign, are the stories of the entrepreneurs and their employees who, through all the odds, persevered, who fought, who stayed open, who, because communities would not let them fail, are still there. That's why I'm running for Senate. This campaign has never been about me. It never will be about me. If I have the honor to represent you in the United States Senate, rest assured that it's the stories of the dairy farmer in Somerset, Casey's Diner in Venango, all of the great businesses in Blair and Berks that we were able to help, and we help businesses across all 67 counties. It's their stories, their fight against a government that could not care, could never care about what it means on Main Street. I'm running to save Main Street, Pennsylvania, because I know and love Main Street, Pennsylvania. This is a calling to represent this Commonwealth, which can be the fastest growing, most dynamic state in the nation. Our children, instead of being our greatest export, this should be the place where our children and grandchildren choose to live. Our greatest export needs to be energy and agriculture. God bless you all for your activism and your work. Thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you. If I could ask, all of you are well-known conservative political activists, so you will understand exactly what I'm about to say. Running for the United States Senate in Pennsylvania is not an easy piece of work. It's hard, and I think we owe every one of these people our thanks for doing it.